Now, President Trump really doesn't like it when information gets out into the media. He calls them leaks. I don't know necessarily what constitutes a leak or not, I guess. But it appears that the entire administration, John Kelly and the Justice Department, they're all looking for people who are leaking to the media and are punishing them, or well, I should say they're attempting to punish them very, very harshly. Now, as far as leakers go, there are intentional leakers, and I'm assuming that there are unintentional leakers, and you can add Trump's lawyers to the list of people who unintentionally leak to the media. They were recently caught doing something incredibly stupid. Recently, the New York Times had caught Trump lawyers Ty Cobb and John Dowd having lunch at a Washington restaurant. Now, that's not a problem, but where the problem is when they're actually discussing work, like potential matters relating to the investigation, the Mueller investigation, out in the open where anybody can hear. And that's what happened. And this particular restaurant happened to be right next door to the Washington bureau of the New York Times. Like literally right next to it. So you have a lot of New York Times reporters that will go there for lunch and to conduct business, right? And so here's Trump lawyers, which again, this restaurant is also fairly near the White House. So again, it would make sense for them to also go there for lunch. But again, this is a working lunch, and they ended up discussing business. Now, some of the people, as I said, that could end up being there at the same time as people from the White House could end up being reporters. And that's exactly what happened when Cobb and Dowd decided to take this lunch and discuss this business. Now, the person that was there, who happened to see them there and overhear their conversation, was none other than investigative reporter Kenneth Vogel. Now, Vogel, as I said, he's a very good investigative reporter. Used to work for Politico. Now he works for the New York Times. So I'm going to ask a question. What happens when you get Trump lawyers having a working lunch discussing this information next to a guy that is a veteran investigative reporter? Well, it turns out things get very interesting. According to the Washington Post, Vogel ended up overhearing the lawyers talking about one of the White House counsels. Now, this is Donald F. McGahn II, as well as Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, as well as overhearing their opinion on the infamous Trump Tower meeting with, of course, Donald Trump Jr. and that Russian lawyer. Now, apparently, Mr. Cobb seems to have a problem with McGahn. Now, he also, since they don't quite agree on certain issues, and I'm going to get into what those certain issues are, but Mr. Cobb was heard talking about a White House lawyer that he deemed a, quote, McGahn spy, and claimed that McGahn might have some documents locked up in a safe. And he wants access to what's in that safe. That's very interesting. He also mentioned a colleague who he blamed for some of the earlier leaks in the administration and who he said tried to push Jared Kushner out. He said, quote, the White House's counsel office is being very conservative with this stuff. Mr. Cobb told Mr. Dowd, our view is that we're not hiding anything. So that goes to the crux of where McGahn and Cobb actually disagree. But again, I'm going to get into that in a minute. Mr. Cobb also discussed the 2016 Trump Tower meeting and the White House's response to it, saying, quote, that there was no perception that there was an exchange. And of course, that would mean that there was that is in reference to whether or not there was an exchange of information between the Trump campaign, Donald Trump Jr., and Natalia Veselnitskaya, who happens to be that Russian lawyer connected to the Putin administration. So here they are. They're talking openly about the Mueller investigation and about so-called possible locked up documents that are in the possession of Donald McGahn. Now, I wonder what are those, what are in those documents? It's very curious. So look, what this shows you though, is that there's some division within Trump's lawyers when it comes to the investigation. And that's actually what this argument's about. Now, Ty Cobb, he's apparently in favor of giving over as many documents as they can to Robert Mueller, in order to basically, hey, Len, I don't believe that Trump did anything. Here's all the relevant information. We're going to give you everything that we got, Mueller, so we can get this investigation out of the way. And furthermore, I don't think Trump did anything. There's no deal. So here's all the information, right? Now, it turns out that Donald McGahn is a little less forthcoming about that information, but not quite so. Mr. McGahn, they write, supports cooperation, but has expressed worry about setting a precedent that would weaken the White House long after Mr. Trump's tenure is over. He is described as particularly concerned about whether the president will invoke executive or attorney-client privilege to limit how forthcoming Mr. McGahn could be if he is himself interviewed by the special counsel if requested. Now, that's really important because if Trump does invoke executive or attorney-client privilege, well, that would look really bad, wouldn't it? That would automatically make you look incredibly guilty. No. You know what? He cannot testify because attorney-client privilege. What are you going to do? Can't get any information out of him about the Russia investigation. That's very interesting, Mr. Trump. Why would you do that if you don't have anything to hide? Now, Cobb, as I explained earlier, was the opposite. He said, look, if you give Mueller all the information that he requests and all that he needs, well, that will ultimately exonerate Mr. Trump and will steer the investigation away from him and down to some of the underlings like Paul Manafort, etc., right? So basically, one is on the side of, hey, I'm worried about the executive power in the long term and whether or not this will weaken the executive branch. The other one is Trump's personal lawyer, and he's like, I just want to protect Trump. And look, that's a sensible position when you're considered the positions that they're in as lawyers. One is the actual White House special counsel, and the other is Trump's personal lawyer. Now, that, of course, creates a little bit of discord, which played out in an argument held after the comments were overheard by Vogel and reported to the media. In fact, Vogel went to the White House and was like, or the New York Times, I should say, went to the White House and said, we overheard this conversation. And so suck it. We know all about your internal divisions. In fact, the Times writes, after we contacted the White House about the situation, Mr. McGahn privately erupted at Mr. Cobb, according to people informed about the confrontation, who asked not to be named. John F. Kelly, the White House chief of staff, during that had sharply reprimanded Mr. Cobb for his indiscretion. So, a little bit of drama going on here. Like I said, a little discord. They continue. Tension between the two comes as life in the White House is shadowed by the investigation. Not only do Mr. Trump and Mr. Kushner and Mr. McGahn all have lawyers, but so do other senior officials. So the lawyers, okay, it's gotten so bad that the lawyers also have lawyers. Everybody's lawyered up, even the lawyers. That's crazy. I've never heard of this before. Now, they furthermore write that the uncertainty has grown to the point that White House officials privately express fear that colleagues may be wearing a wire to surreptitiously record conversations for Mr. Mueller. That is crazy. Hey, you're not wearing a wire, are you? I don't know. Are you wearing a wire? You could be wearing a wire. What about you? You. Are you wearing a wire? You wearing a wire? I'm not wearing a wire. Or am I? Nobody trusts each other. So that just shows you how the investigation has made this White House incredibly dysfunctional, even more so than it would normally be. So, and look, to be 100% fair, under those conditions, do you think anything could get done? No, absolutely not. Trump's actually right. And when he says that the investigation has certainly impeded his administration, of course. I mean, I couldn't imagine working in that kind of horrific atmosphere. Like, you don't know who to trust. Like, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Are you going to implicate me in this federal investigation? I don't know. I don't know. So I can't trust you with information, and I can't really trust to work with you. But so that's what's going on inside the White House. But again, their complete disagreement is about how much information they would give to Mueller. And of course, one also has more of a personal relationship with Mr. Trump, which might show you the direction that Trump is going. Admirers said that Mr. Cobb has developed a rapport with the president and does not report to Mr. McGahn, who they believe feels insecure about his place in Mr. Trump's orbit. So, okay. So immediately, like if you have a personal rapport with Donald Trump, well, that's incredibly helpful. And if you don't, again, that means that your position is going to be undercut in the administration. And remember, this is a very competitive atmosphere as well as being completely distrustful. So that's a very interesting dynamic to try and navigate when you're inside that White House. Now, Mr. McGahn's supporters, however, argue that Mr. Cobb is wildly over-optimistic to think that he can steer the investigation away from the president, given that Mr. Mueller has now hired 17 different prosecutors. Now, is it normal for lawyers to disagree? I think, yes. If you're in a legal team, you're going to have differing opinions. That's fine. However, I also must note that I haven't had personal experience with that. But I'm sure that there are legal teams that sometimes disagree and don't get along. Then again, claiming that another lawyer has secret documents hidden in a safe, that's a little weird. Okay. Now, compare this team to Mueller's team. Now, Mueller's team is full of very professional people, industry professionals, that left some very lucrative cases to join in what's become a massive investigation into financial corruption and even money laundering. So if you're going to compare both teams, both legal teams, 17 lawyers looking into this financial corruption and these Russian ties versus Donald Trump's team that thinks that the other people are hiding documents in safes and are talking shit in the open air restaurants in Washington. Not very professional. It's not looking good for the Trump team. They seem very, very organized, or very unorganized, and very, very unprepared for what's going to be coming. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.